Ladies and gents, thanks for joining us for another show on engineers. Today we've got Robert Hook, who's joining us as an engineering manager from Pleo. And what these guys and girls are doing are bettering spending for organizations. We're going to dig into some of that. We're going to dig into some of the challenges and some of Robert's excitement around data. We're going to be talking a little bit about infrastructure as a service and many, many other things, as you can see in the comments below on some of the subjects. So, Robert, how are you? Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, hi Elliot. Thanks for having me here today. Going quite well, thank you.
Pleasure. Give us an intro on you.
Yeah, so I've been involved in IT, computing, playing with computers for 38 years. Or that's 38 years that I've been paid to do it. There's a few years prior to that when I was a kid, as we all were. I've been involved in virtually every vertical that you can think of, from dog registration systems through library, through property management, GIS, police systems, and insurance and banking. I think genuinely the only sector I've never done much work in is medical. The common thread has always been about data. It's always been about how we can get data in front of people, how we can get data from people, how we can get data to people, but more importantly, how we can safely and securely use data for business outcomes.
Tell me a little bit about what's changed or what you've seen change in those.
I have seen things you people wouldn't believe.
Really?
No, I think I've seen several cycles of data tech over my years. I was fortunate enough to be there at the time when the new and exciting thing on the market was relational database systems.
Okay.
And there was definitely a sweep through where the exciting thing was to put it all into Oracle or into Ingress at the time. The great dawning of data. There was, of course, then the big push around the turn of the century to start building big databases, and
Okay.
there was a lot of technical changes there, where people were going from sort of like megabyte level databases up to hundreds of megabytes or
Yeah.
maybe even gigabyte at the time, and that brought all sorts of challenges. Next phase that really came through was the phase that kicked off, I guess, around about 12, 15 years ago, where we looked at moving towards big data. And that was the biggest explosion. It was like the Cambrian explosion of life. The number of products on the market exploded, the number of disciplines exploded. It was really about that point that we started getting a lot of specialization in terms of what engineering meant in that data space. Particularly, I think it was only around the 15-ish, 10-ish year mark that companies started saying, well, we've got to start measuring the quality of our data. We've got to start measuring the how we are managing our data. We've started thinking about
Yeah.
data governance. We started to think about ontologies, and this is all quite recent activity.
Okay. How would you explain big data to someone walking to them in the street if they were non-technical?
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually quite an easy explanation. It's one that I cheerfully have stolen, which is any data that's too big to fit on one computer.
Okay, I like that. That is nice and simple.
It's a nice simple motto. And it's funny how it evolves, because quite a lot of companies, quite a lot of business bases, they don't actually have a lot of data, and they
Okay.
could actually put most of their data onto one machine if they wanted to.
Okay.
Not a great idea, but it's feasible. And I think that that's where the big differentiator comes from. If we're really talking about big data with a capital B and a capital D,
Yeah.
it's any time where it's difficult to manage without spreading it across a number of different machines.
Okay.
And because you've spread it across a number of different machines, all of a sudden you need specific tooling. You need to be able to distribute your processing across it. You need to be able to network it. You need to be able to treat it as a manageable cluster, and the complexities escalate fairly quickly. Conversely, though, of course, in the day of cloud,
Yeah.
AWS or Azure or
Yeah.
Google will just take care of all that complexity for you. So the problem has gone away again.
It is the data game purely financial? Let's just use an example: data to understand what consumers want, or being risk averse, data governance to protect our data for leaks and security and anything else. Is it purely financial, do you think?
No, yes and no. Um, a lot of very large data sets, leaving aside the social media data sets, a lot of very large data sets are at their heart financial. We spend money, we buy things, we sell things
Yeah.
at an astounding rate. So we have extremely large data sets, which are very fine-grained levels, records of transactions. And that's interesting. It's important. We need to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But what is quite interesting is that you can start to derive individual behaviors
Hmm.
by looking at the patterns of spend, looking at the patterns of purchasing, looking at the patterns of data transfer.
Yeah.
I was first exposed to this idea well over a decade ago, around the turn of the century,
Mm.
when I was working with a payments processor in Australia. And we covered payments for online payments, so using a credit card to buy things
Mm.
online for most of EMEA, all of the Pacific Rim, most of South America,
Yeah.
huge chunks of Europe. And we used to see this strange pattern in the data, which was every day, every working day, around 6 p.m. in Singapore, we'd see a massive, massive, massive spike in transactions for
Mm.
one vendor. Now, we had on the operations side, all of the data was anonymized, so we didn't know what was going on. And it
Mm.
wasn't causing a problem, it was just weird. It wasn't until somebody who had lived in Singapore pointed out that Singapore at the time was the only place on the planet you could order Kentucky Fried Chicken online. And everybody in Singapore at the time was crazy for Kentucky Fried Chicken. So what was happening was people were stopping work, getting home, pulling the credit card out, and ordering home delivered Kentucky Fried Chicken. This is the sort of thing which we can now derive from data.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier now because we've got a lot more fine-grained data. We can start deriving behaviors
Mm.
of cohorts of people, of individual people, and that's powerful. And that power gives both great opportunities but great risks. Um, we can, generally speaking, your bank would be able to determine where you are and when you're traveling.
Mm.
Is this something we're comfortable with? Yes, yes and no. It depends how it's used. It depends on how the business then is deciding to gain insight, what knowledge they gain from their data, and then what they do with that knowledge. The data itself is neutral.
Yeah.
The knowledge is dangerous.
Yeah. I feel the knowledge is probably quite dangerous. You could probably, if you had data on someone's spending habits, a little bit like the Kentucky Fried Chicken scenario, you would probably be able to trace back someone's whereabouts if you start looking at their habits on a daily, weekly, monthly basis.
Yes, quite
Um,
definitely.
yeah, definitely. But
And there's an interesting problem there, though, because while you have that power and you can gain that knowledge, you could use that knowledge for the benefit of the customer.
true.
As an example, would it be attractive to customers if we made arrangements with your favorite coffee shops so that when you buy your coffee, you get a discount?
Yeah,
That's it's good for the customer. It's good for the vendor.
true.
Um, is that too scary
Yeah,
to have that knowledge? Difficult
it's
to
a
say.
good question.
It
It's
is a
a
very
good
good
question.
question.
I'm sure we're going to see the answer probably in the next few years, no doubt.
Yes, yeah. It's not to give too much away about Pleo, but that is the sort of conversation we're having internally, because we're realizing that we do potentially have that power, and it's not a technological problem anymore. It's a problem around how we want our customers to trust us, and how we want our customers to perceive how we are working with them.
Yeah. Do you want to give us that pitch on Pleo?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about Pleo, because Pleo's an unusual company.
Okay.
Just to give you a little bit of context on how unusual Pleo is, I was in a call in my personal life, completely unrelated to Pleo, with another company, talking to the CTO, and I'm happy to mention I was in Pleo, and he chewed my ear for about 5 minutes, raving about how good Pleo's product was, how much he loved it, how easy it made his life. And it's like, you don't get very many products where people do that.
Okay, yeah, true.
So Pleo was founded in 2015 by two guys in Denmark, Jeppe Rindom and Nico Pera. And they wanted, their initial goal and their desire was, what's a product we can bring to market that just makes everybody's day a little bit easier?
Okay.
What's the thing that we could move the needle on that makes things easier?
Yeah.
And what they picked on was the idea of trying to make expenses, employee expenses, easier, because everyone hates expenses. It's every solution before Pleo was miserable. It's grown astoundingly since 2015. We are on a amazing growth trajectory. When I joined in June 2021, I was employee number 300. We have just passed 518 as of yesterday, and we're on the way to 1,000 by the end of the year.
Wow.
Which is startling growth. Absolutely unpredictable. We're doing very comfortably financially. We had a last Series C funding round last year in December. Took our valuation to 4.7 billion US, which was very exciting for everyone working there, because it's like, wow, we are now actually on paper bigger than Monzo Bank, which is not something that any of us, I think, expected. But it's huge. It gives us incredible freedom to get things done.
On the surface of things, I wouldn't have expected that either.
No. Well, it's technically it was Denmark's first tech unicorn.
Okay.
Absolutely crazy growth. Running at about 20,000 customers, mainly SMEs. Historically, we've targeted sort of like up to about 500 person company.
Okay.
Primarily because bigger companies, bigger enterprises often have a very complicated and well-established arrangement about their expenses and complicated accounting procedures. So it's a little bit more difficult for them to onboard.
Less barriers to entry, etc.
Yeah, and that equates to somewhere well north of about 150,000 active users at the moment.
Okay.
Which is pretty good. We've focused mainly on the UK, Denmark, Sweden, Germany, Ireland, and Spain up until today. We have a goal now to spread throughout Europe. We want to hit every European country. We've just launched Finland and Austria this week. And we're probably going to be rolling out 2 countries a month for the rest of the year.
Nice.
Which is pretty cool. And we're setting up offices in a lot of these countries as we go, or at least a small physical presence.
Yep.
So yeah, we are on the way. In terms of what we do, well, why is Pleo so great? If you go to our website, you'll see the tagline, the office, the pitch, and it really pins it down. Pleo is the spending solution for forward-thinking teams.
Yep.
The idea is that we want to get rid of all that pain around paying. If you're a small business and you've got, 24 employees, and they're buying stuff for the company and they're spending the money and they're paying bills for the company.
Yep.
It's traditional ways of doing that have been a pain in the neck for everyone. They're a pain in the neck for the employee. They're doing end of month expense reports. They've got some complicated procedure for
Yep.
signing off on bills. It's just horrible. The employee hates it. The employer hates it. The bookkeeper hates it. It's just terrible. And we've all been in businesses where that's the case.
Yep.
So what we aim to do is take away that particular pain. How can we make it easy for your employees to spend money? But there's a secret. There's a secret sauce in here. That's not what we sell. What we sell is an idea.
Okay.
We sell an idea that you as an employee can trust your you as an employer can trust your employees. You can trust them with your money. You can trust them to do the right thing. And we empower people to have that trust. And how that manifests is you want your employee to be able to spend your money. Give them a card, spending limit, and we smooth the road for being able to make that spending accountable.
Okay.
Absolutely transparent how that money's getting spent. You've got absolute control over what happens, and you don't have to be involved with it. You can just let it happen. And that's the scary thing. That's scary for enterprises. Enterprises don't like trusting people.
Okay.
So I think to make that a little bit more concrete, we'll talk about some of the sort of use cases that we have there, because this is important to understand what we do. So let's imagine that you are running a bar, dozen odd people. One of the things that's going to happen on a Friday night is you run out of crisps.
Yep.
Oh no, what do? Run out of crisps. Somebody runs down to Tesco, buys a few dozen packets of crisps. So the expenses procedure is he takes the Pleo card out, he pays for it on their phone. It comes up a reminder, hey, don't forget to take a photo of the receipt. He pulls the receipt out, snaps it, pushes the go button, and that's the end of the process.
Nice.
There is no expenses process past there.
Perfect.
We've got back-end integrations with things like Xero and other accounting systems, so we can do end-to-end of that. Another example, in my role as engineering manager, there's all sorts of software subscriptions that I have to pay for.
Yeah.
What am I paying for at the moment? Lucid is one of the ones I'm paying for. Shout out to Lucid.
Yeah.
Shout out to Retrium. They issue invoices. They send me invoices. Our software, or part of our software, which we call Fetch, watches my email, sees the invoice come in, goes, I can see the number on that. I can see the vendor looks like one we've got, and I can see the transactions going on the card. I'll just glue those two receipts together, and off you go.
Yeah, simple.
So all of those subscriptions, the paperwork for me is zero.
Yeah.
I don't need to do anything. It just happens. And that is amazing. This is so cool. I've been in the position of having to deal with these sort of paperwork before. And in previous roles, I would spend anywhere up to a day a week just dealing with that kind of paperwork. Now, nothing.
Wow.
Crashed to zero.
It's
that plugs into. Oh, sorry. Please go on.
No, I was going to say it seems like an extremely seamless process. I'd be quite interested to know, are there any security restrictions on, if someone not necessarily goes AWOL. It seems like it's tied with a spending limit to each account, so you could limit what someone is potentially going to go and spend in their own respective role. But I think the seamlessness just feels, because I've been there, I do expenses, take a photo, and boom, it's already plugged into. I think I've used some software where it naturally goes to my Xero account, and it will probably match up the two. Nice. Okay.
And the question, how do we make that safe? The question of how we make it safe really comes back to the fact that we really sell trust. And you get to dial, as a customer, you get to dial up and down how much trust you have. So you can set up review processes. You can set up somebody has to tick the box yes on if it's over this much. You can set up flagging for transactions which are kind of unusual. The one that the previous company we used to joke about was you can spend it on anything but don't buy any cars. But we could have set up a filter on that, for example.
Yeah.
And that's the other side of trust. Trust is absolutely in the DNA of Pleo, and
Nice.
we'll talk about that a little bit because I think it's important for how we do our engineering.
Yeah.
But how do you trust your employees? You trust the employees by empowering them,
Yeah.
and part of the empowering is to have a safety net under them so that they can't fall through the gaps, they can't trip over and plummet to their financial death.
Makes sense.
So the two things go hand in hand: empowerment and trust, and having backup behind it so that
Good.
you can handle things going wrong.
That's pretty solid. Should we talk about some of the products that you've got and some of the engineering that actually underpins some of those products? A little bit like the intro, you've got some interesting challenges around data, quite clearly. It's why you're part of the business. You want to talk about things like data meshes, infrastructure as a
Yeah.
service, etc., which we will. But I think there'll be quite a nice tie between some of the products like Fetch that you've built, and some of the engineering that underpins them and the business.
It's a really good place to segue. One of the things that is the enabler for Pleo's business is that historically it's been very engineer led. It's been very tech focused.
Yeah,
One of our founders, Nico, at heart is definitely first and foremost an engineer.
solid.
This means that we have structured the organization such that teams are very autonomous. There's very high levels of autonomy down at the team level, which is good and bad, because it means if you've got autonomy at the team level, there are complexities of ensuring consistency across teams.
Yeah,
This, by trusting our teams technically and providing the autonomy, empowering them to be autonomous, means we can iterate very quickly on technology, and we do iterate extremely quickly on technology. That's then underpinned by a few architectural choices.
hmm
We're cloud first, mainly AWS cloud. We have data assets in BigQuery, in GCP, which I'll come back to in a minute, Google
yeah,
Cloud. We use almost exclusively Kubernetes under AWS for deployment.
hmm
There's a few other bits and pieces, the serverless bits and pieces, mainly in Node for the serverless, but the core of it is Kubernetes.
hmm
That gives us great flexibility. It means that we can iterate and we can roll out, roll back, scale up, scale down with effectively zero effort. We then manage all of that infrastructure with Terraform, or primarily Terraform.
hmm
And we have wired our Terraform into a CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment pipeline using a product called Env0. And this is interesting because it means that a significant changes in our infrastructure
mm
can go from developers' desktop to production in, generally speaking, less than 20 minutes. There's a review process. We use GitOps to ensure that there's reviews. We pre-flight the changes in a testing environment. We get the thumbs up to apply the change, and it can sail out there. So we push out new versions multiple times a day
Okay,
of our
nice.
platform. It's always shifting. Of course, to enable that, we have embraced a microservices architecture.
Yeah.
Uh, I've lost track of how many services we're running. It's somewhere on the order of about 50 services at the moment.
Okay.
The fact that we have got microservices architecture and there are so many and we can deploy is it doesn't really matter how many we have.
Yeah.
It's a constantly shifting number. So those microservices are, again, as I said, deployed in Kubernetes. which gives us superb ability to roll out, roll back, scale up, scale down at a second's notice. The services themselves are a mixture of Kotlin and Node. I'd say probably at the moment it'd be about 3/4 of the services are written in Kotlin as opposed to Node. But we are also language agnostic. In the data space, we've got things in Python, we've got things in Go, we've got a few bits and pieces of Java floating around.
Yep.
And really what goes on inside the container doesn't matter. It's what goes on inside the container stays in the container. What else is going on? So with respect to data, because we have a microservices architecture, if a service needs its own local storage, we use Postgres, provided by Amazon RDS. And again, that's a hell of an enabler for a company like ours who wants to iterate quickly, because Amazon take care of the nuts and bolts of running those services, of keeping them up and guaranteeing it. We never really have to think too hard about any questions of scaling or any questions of provisioning. We define it in Terraform, we push the button. A little while later, the database is up and running and we're off and rolling. And that's about the extent of it. Things get a little more complicated with our analytical data, and this is where my main interest is in, and also where we have the biggest complexities. So our data space needs some love. It needs some love and attention, because Pleo has been a growing organization, has been a rapidly growing organization, because we've gone from 2 people in a shed to 500 on towards 1,000. We move fast and things break. And what we're seeing in the data space is the problem that now we've had 2 generations of change. And we're carrying the technical debt from 2 generations of stage, and we're rapidly building the 3rd generation of technical debt. And that's not great. The core of our data space is BigQuery in Google. It's an interesting beast, BigQuery, because it manages to successfully hide the MapReduce type queries and the MapReduce type jobs, and hide it all behind what looks like an SQL interface. And because it appears to be just an SQL database, it's incredibly accessible for analysts. If we were using something like DynamoDB, where it's completely different query semantics, it maybe give us the same power, give us the same sort of performance, but it is opaque to analysts. And that can't be undervalued. There's interesting problems come out because we have some parts of the data in the operational plane is in AWS, and the analytical plane is in BigQuery.
I was going to ask you about that. I won't cut your flow, but as in, there's obviously large levels of storage in BigQuery. What was that decision between AWS and GCP?
Yeah, no, it's a really good one. And really the driver for the decision was how attractive BigQuery is from the point of view of the analytical users. The interface for it is just, it feels comfortable for analysts. And we can't undervalue that. From a technical point of view, I think the big benefit for BigQuery as an analytical store, and it's very much a traditional data warehouse we have there, is that it scales automatically and indefinitely. Much like S3, you can't put enough load on it to ever notice it slow down or to be a bottleneck. It will always respond in roughly linear time, no matter what you do. Of course, behind the scenes, it means that you may be going up and down on your spend. That query across 38 million transactions might have come back to you in a second and a half, but it, by the way, that just costs €5. These are that is always a fun challenge. The glue between the two is also kind of fiddly, because as you can imagine, being a financial institution, we have very, very,
Mm,
very careful boundaries around all of our estate. And then we need to deal with the challenge of taking things cross cloud.
yeah,
And I think that's an ongoing journey. We can carefully poke holes in our firewalls and carefully ring fence the who can talk to what between
yeah,
clouds. Uh, but each provider is constantly iterating on how to make that safer, how to establish effectively dedicated VPNs that span the two clouds.
yeah.
I don't think that journey is finished yet. The security of linking that is going to be an ongoing problem.
Yeah. What's that journey been like of going through two generations of technical debt as well? It's still
Yeah,
building and being as transparent as possible from a data perspective, potentially rewriting services and carrying some of the old with you. What's that journey been like?
difficult
Yeah,
is the best bet. One of the things we've seen, we have a few services that were written early, like an early version, early instantiation of a
yeah,
sort of version 0.0 of a data warehouse. The people who built it in the first place have left. They've left behind some overly complex code, and finding resources who can, or finding staff who can deal with that is a problem. Not entirely because it's in Kotlin, and Kotlin skills are a little bit all over the place in the market. A
yeah,
lot of people use Kotlin for Android development, of
of
course.
course. Yeah,
Not so many people using it on the back end, even though it's incredibly capable on the back end.
yeah,
And by the time we say we want it to be back end and we want people to be data literate, we've got a very small pool of people to source for that.
yeah,
So there's a barrier there, barrier of entry for maintaining the code. The biggest problem, though, is that because Pleo was data centric from the beginning, because Pleo wants to use its data for
fine.
day-to-day operation of the business, the early iterations of our data platform are still in active use for operational activities.
Yeah,
The analogy the analogy that's come to mind for a few of us in recent months is that we know what has to change. We know we have to change it, but we've got a race car that's running around the track,
I knew you were using that one. I just
and
knew you
we're
were
we're
using that one.
we are out there on the front of the car changing the engine while it's still going around the
Yeah,
track, and that is necessarily a really complicated problem. It raises the question of how do we make the changes technically? How do we make the changes so that they're transparent? How can we make changes so it affects people the least? But often it's a cultural change.
yeah,
If we build a new delivery route for the same information, how can we help the teams that are using the operational information to transition from one to the other? How can we do that smoothly so that they can
mm,
still keep being on on the phone to the customer,
makes sense.
uh, and still keep providing Pleo's business?
Makes
Um,
sense.
I wish there was an easy answer. Um, as I said, I've been doing this for 38 years. I've never seen a good answer for that one because it is cultural. It's always about the people. It's how can you do you have a culture that allows you to collaborate with people across teams, across domains, across competencies?
Okay.
Do you have a culture that where everybody involved around that central problem trusts each other,
Yeah,
so they will not assume that you're trying to break their world; they'll assume that you're trying to fix your world.
yeah, that makes sense.
And it's tough. It's a tough ride. Um, I'd like to say that the real solution for technical debt is don't create it in the first place, but that's kind
It's
of like
never going to
bugs as
happen.
well. Best way to prevent bugs is don't write bugs.
Uh, talk to us a little bit about data meshing at Pleo.
Perfect segue to talk about this, because that's really the core of the other part of our problem. So I mentioned we've got technical debt problems.
Yeah.
Technical debt problems are really rising from multiple generations of our data warehouse. But the interesting problem is, how can we get to the point where the providers of data, who are our operational teams, our product teams,
Yeah.
want to provide data
Okay.
for analysis? And that's a big cultural shift. We think that the solution to that is data mesh.
Okay.
And wow, we've got a long way to go on that. That's a big cultural shift. We've gone through this cultural shift, I think, different paces in different companies over the last few years with DevOps.
Yeah. Okay.
We roll back the clock 5-ish years and people started talking about DevOps. And this
Yeah.
was an earth-shaking idea that maybe you get to the point where your product teams aren't just throwing their operations over the fence to the dev guy, to the
Yeah.
ops guys. Now we need to do the same thing with data.
Okay.
How can we have a culture where people don't want to just throw the data over the fence to the data guys? For us, it's fairly straightforward. Conceptually, great. We want each of the product teams, ideally, can define a set of data. They're publishing a set of data. They take ownership of publishing that data. It's wrapped up with SLAs. It's got quality guarantees. It's versioned. All very nice. And that might be a database they're publishing, might be a Kafka topic they're publishing. It doesn't really matter. The tech doesn't really matter. But if they are consciously producing a piece of a data product, then tickety-boo, great, they own it from that point. Our CTO actually, Peter Janda, actually phrased it really well a few months ago. He said, we need to get to a point where we're not treating data as an accidental byproduct of what we do.
Okay. That's nice.
And that's what we've got at the moment. Data is an accidental byproduct of our operation.
Yeah.
And we need to flip that around to being a conscious thing that we are doing. And that is a huge change for engineers and product teams to think about there. This is massive. We've started talking about this to all of our product teams, and mostly they're on board. Mostly they're like, yeah, we like this idea.
Yeah.
It has a lot of benefits for us, because it takes away pain points that we have, and I think every company has, around what happens if the data coming from the operational plane changes.
Okay.
Changes its schema, it changes its semantics. How do we ensure that the people who are consuming the data in the analytics plane get timely understanding of the changes, the semantics of the data? That's effectively every day something happens where it's like somebody's changed the table over here and half the dashboards break. So we know absolutely, if we can move the needle towards data products, even leaving aside data mesh, just data products, if we can move the needle to there, takes away a butt ton of problems we've got.
Okay.
But zero level on that is that we realize we haven't got the tooling.
Okay.
And that's where I think the current philosophy around data mesh falls down is, and if you talk to the data mesh guys, you talk to Zamek, you talk to some of the evangelists in that space, they say it's not about the tech, and they are right. But every company needs to provide tools that are enablers for data products. And really that highlights the things that we're missing from our architecture, is automation of data lineage, automation of data quality testing, common agreements about what the company's ontology is. And wow, that was an adventure, discovering that we deal with card transactions, discovering that different teams have different definitions for what a transaction was. And the teams didn't know this until we started talking about it, and they were like, "Oh, hang on, yeah, we have different understandings of what it means." And that's always exciting. So even before we get to the point of saying, "Okay, bam, that team, the team that's doing the card payments is now going to publish a data product. Wacko, they're going to own that all the way into our data warehouse." Before we get there, we have to then be raising the understanding of data with our product teams, making them data literate, and raising the literacy of data within the company. Understand that it's not just about the bits and bytes, it's the understandings of the data, it's the semantics about the data, it's the ontology of what does Pleo mean when it talks about a customer.
If someone's listening to this, your journey now, let's call it third gen, um, it seems like there's quite a lot of enlightenment around tooling and facilitation and enablement for teams to be able to use this data. If someone's listening, what's the best bit of advice you're going to give someone uh, to be able to excel and probably have less pains at this moment in time? An idea, and
Mm.
this probably comes from a previous podcast, is I've seen a playbook being built, almost like a rules playbook of, and I'm thinking about that transaction case of, um, this is what we call a transaction potentially, or this is
Yeah.
maybe how we could actually operate something. I don't know if
Yeah,
there's
I think.
learnings that you can give people.
Yeah, no, I think there's probably two pieces of advice, um, depending on the size of the organization that people are in and the culture of the organization. But I would definitely emphasize the importance of having common language and common
Mm,
understandings. Any organization that has got different divisions or different departments or has somehow a federation of competing tribes.
yeah.
As number of banks I've worked with can be described as a federation of tribes that is constantly at war with each other. It's vitally important to have a common language and a common understanding of what your data is. Um, that's both the data at rest and the data in motion. Uh, do you have an understanding of how your data is moving? Do you have an understanding of where it's coming from? Do you have an understanding of where it's going? Do you have an understanding of who's responsible for it? And
Mm,
very often the answer is no. And these are really tough questions that they can be very, very hard to get a handle on, particularly with a big organization. But they're vital. You can't talk about your data unless you have a language to talk about it. You
okay.
can't talk about changes unless you have a common understanding of where you are now.
Okay.
The other thing I would add to that, though, as a piece of advice, is the engineering around data uh, is incredibly dynamic. The tooling we're using now is not the tooling we were using 5 years ago,
Okay.
and it is not going to be the tooling we're using 5 years from now.
Yep.
If you think about it, 5 years ago, everyone was building Hadoop clusters and faffing about with Pig and Spark and Hive and all those bits and pieces. Nobody
Yep.
does it now.
No.
5 years from now, don't know what we'll be doing. But
Yep.
whatever we're doing 5 years from now is not what we're doing now. But
Yep.
the data lives forever.
Yep.
The tooling change. You should expect that the tooling will change. You shouldn't be wrapped up in getting the perfect tooling, because you're not going to get the perfect tooling, and whatever you're
Okay.
doing now, you're probably not going to keep doing. Get the tooling that's good enough for the job. Get the tooling that's good enough to do what you need right now. But get the data structures right. Get the security around your data right. Get your models around your data right. Get an understanding of what your data means, because
Okay.
that's going to live forever.
Okay.
Watch, maybe not forever, but I think if anyone listening is like, oh, I don't know, that sounds very, very abstract. Go to your CEO and say, do you want the company to be here 30 years from now? 30 years from now, is the company going to want to know what we were doing today? And your CEO is going to say, hell yeah,
Yeah.
because that CEO is not worried about just next year or next 6 months or getting to the end of the year.
Yeah.
That CEO is watching to see what his retirement plans are 30 years from now.
Yeah.
Knowledge and the data that underpins knowledge you should expect lives forever,
Okay.
or at least for the lifespan of the company.
That's a really good philosophy. Go and do it, people
Yeah,
listening. Go and talk to the
I
person or the peoples and say, where do you want to be?
where do you want to be? And the answer may be surprising. You may get the answer back, which is no, I don't care about the data. In which case, yeah, that's if the business actually turns out not to care.
Yeah.
then you probably saved yourself an awful lot of heartache and money.
Yeah, true. True. You've you've really well summarized and taken us on a little bit of a journey around Pleo, values, your cloud native approach, your infrastructure as a service, data. So I want to thank you for that because it's been interesting, it's been compelling, and you're able to back that up with some real life value for customers, but real life cases as well. Before we disappear, it would be great for people listening to understand, can they fit into Pleo's journey over the 518 to 1,000 people this year? Where are you hiring for? What
Where
are
are we
you
hiring? That'd be
hiring?
great.
Help us understand that.
Okay. Yep. Well, this is my chance to start saying, yeah, I'm looking for a bunch of data engineers and analysts and analytical engineers. The first place I will categorically say is if you're interested in coming on board with Pleo, find our website at pleo.io and go to our careers page. We've got a incredibly, outrageously good internal recruitment team and people ops team. Love those people. They're great. So they are racing at the moment to get the rest of the position descriptions and open positions up. Hopefully by the time this goes to air, that'll be up to date, but it's really close to up to date now. So pleo.io, scroll down the bottom and find our careers page. We're at 518 people right now. We plan to go to, current plan is little over 1,000 by December or end of December. We are hiring for pretty well everything you can think of, and we are hiring for everywhere. We're remote first. Decision made at the beginning of COVID by our founders that they would be remote. We would be primarily a remote first company. We've got people from Montreal to Novgorod, from Uppsala to Cape Town at the moment.
Love it.
We did have somebody working off a beach in Thailand, but
Love
he's
it.
come back to Denmark. We expect to be across time zones. We expect to be remote first. One of the important things to understand about Pleo is, as I said, we are very trust driven. But as it says on our hiring page, the key thing we're down to earth, we're human, and we're honest. People always come first at Pleo.
Okay.
Skills, experience are great, but the attitude is even more important. We're very, very fast moving. We're very, very dynamic. We talk a lot internally. We collaborate a lot.
Okay.
We've got no room for brilliant jerks.
Cool.
We think we're pretty successful at weeding them out. We don't have any at the moment. We've had very few in the past.
Yep.
Our people ops team is extremely good at helping us to find people. The most important characteristics for anyone coming in is to be comfortable with the idea that things will change quickly, to
Cool.
be comfortable with the idea that we will collaborate on things, to be comfortable with the idea that you will be trusted to make significant changes to our product. You will be trusted to make significant changes to our company. We don't muck around when it comes to trust. And that has been quite confronting for some engineers in the past is, what, you mean I get to make a decision about a key technological change? And it's like, yes, you do. You don't need to ask permission.
Yeah. Okay.
Obviously, there's some boundaries of that. If I wanted to go and buy a new
Yeah, I
building
was
for
going to
Pleo,
say.
I'd probably have to talk with Yapper about it. But if I could convince him that it was a good decision, he would trust that I know what I'm talking about.
Good.
And that's Pleo. So please come join us. We are hiring like crazy. We need people. And we're built.
Love it. I love the
Go.
energy, the passion. um, Technology agnostic. Just so I'm really clear for people as well. Are you happy to interview people from all backgrounds?
Yep, definitely. We've got a few bits and pieces that we're keen on. We like to see, some combination of modern languages, Python, Kotlin, Java, maybe .NET. If you know a little bit about cloud, that's good. If you know a little bit about things like Docker and Kubernetes, that's good. But these are pretty well standard parts of an engineer's toolkit now. And we have plenty of gateways to assist people to skill up in areas that are missing.
If you come from a background of modern programming languages, want to work remotely anywhere, trust and being human are obviously some massive values at Pleo. Come and talk to Robert. Don't bombard him, but have a look at the careers page as well, and see what they can show you.
It's been an
You,
absolute
sir,
pleasure.
have been an absolute gent. Thanks for taking us on that journey. And I'll be watching Pleo. I'll be watching the journey. I actually might even invest in the product, not as in financially invest in the product, but maybe start thinking about using the product as well.
Okay, you know where to find us.
I do indeed.
We will sign you straight up.
Love it. Robert, thanks a lot.
Thanks very much.
Good luck
Elliot.
for this
Have
year.
a grand day. Okay,
Cheers,
later,
mate.
mate.
Hey guys, thanks for watching this episode. Massively appreciate you listening and checking in with us. If you want to find out more about us and what we're doing, please check us out on social media. What we're trying to do at Engineers is build a community to drive knowledge sharing and experiences. On Twitter, we can be found Engineers.io. It's no_. We've also got a website which is engineers.io. These links will all be posted in the description. Any feedback and comments are massively appreciated. We're always looking to improve on where we can. Thanks, guys.